What's up, everybody? I'm Skull,
I'm Zombie Cat.
and this is the Horror Den. Now, today we are covering a movie review that I'm really excited about because this is a movie that I've seen, and our editor D-Mac and Zombie Cat here have not. Today we will be covering Rosemary's Baby from 1968, directed by Roman Polanski, starring Mia Farrow. So, this is a movie that we've heard kind of referenced in a lot of horror media that's out there. But for you guys, you've never seen it before. So what'd you think?
I loved it. I really enjoyed it from beginning to end. I was glued to the screen. I loved it. I thought it was really scary. And just all the way through, the atmosphere is incredible.
Hell yeah. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the plot and everything, just going to go ahead and put in a spoiler disclaimer. Yes, we know this movie came out in 1968, so it's not really spoilers anymore. It's kind of more public domain knowledge. But in case you haven't seen the movie, like Zombie Cat and D-Mac here, why don't you go ahead and pause the video, go watch the movie. I'm not sure where it's available for streaming, but you can purchase it still on DVD pretty easily, I'm sure. As well as it's available on digital media like Apple TV and such like that. So if you want to watch the movie, you can find it there pretty cheap usually. Well worth your time. It's a longer movie, so
It was pretty long.
So just be ready to designate at least like 2.5 hours of your time.
It was like 2 hours 15 minutes, I think.
Yeah, still, just to be on the safe side, reserve yourself about 2 hours and 30 minutes. But anyway, let's get into it. So now that the spoilers are out of the way, let's talk about the plot, because we have many pages of notes to get through. All right, so before we get into it, I had to say I only saw this movie a few years ago. That was the first time I saw it, maybe like 1 or 2 years ago. My wife showed it to me because this is a horror movie that she grew up on, and I had never even heard of it up until that point, until I was with her.
Yeah.
So this is still new to me too, even though it's been out forever.
Yeah, I've always just heard the name. I never knew what the story was about or anything like that, so it was all completely a surprise from the beginning.
It was one of those things where I think I had an understanding of what I thought the plot was, but then when I watched the movie and watch how everything unfolds, like it is exactly what I thought it was going to be, but way different. So basically, it starts off, we're in New York, very important to the setting and also the music that we'll talk about as we go. So it starts with this couple, we're in New York, and the couple's name is Rosemary and Guy, and that's pretty much the main two characters of our whole plot. And they are looking at an apartment in kind of like the bigger apartments in New York, like higher end kind of, but it's a little older, so it's more like historic. And they come into this apartment where the former tenant there had just passed away after being in a coma for a number of weeks. And she had like a garden and everything inside. And it's very important to note that in the hallway when they're walking through, they see this, I don't know if it's like a shift robe or a dresser, but it's sitting in the middle of the hallway blocking a linen closet door. And the real estate agent is like, well, I guess she didn't need 5 closets. But they move it, and it kind of skips to them talking to their old landlord / family friend named Hutch, who is talking about the building and how there's a lot of dark history there, that there was this witch that helped build it that's named Adrian Mercado. And he was killed in the lobby. And then during like World War II, it was used as an apartment building, and they found a dead infant in the basement. And it's just like a lot of weird, mysterious happenings have happened around this apartment building. So Rosemary falls in love with the apartment. They decide to take it. Guy is an up-and-coming actor who's worked in like commercials and TV and a couple of plays. And I just want to say, you know, as kind of a lower level performer myself, they live a very extravagant lifestyle for an actor.
Yeah, very. I mean, he's doing plays and TV commercials. I believe that's all he said.
Yeah, and like we'll get to this in just a second, but one of the other characters comes in later and talks about this chair that they have in their living room, and is like, how much is that? And she's like, it's $200, and this was in the 60s. So $200 then versus $200 now is very different. Like, that's wealth, you know, in order to spend $200 on a chair.
I wish we could have looked up how much that would have been.
Like a conversion rate.
Because this took place in 65. Because there's a new year.
This is one of those things where it's like, at this time, if what my mom says is right, then like allowance, you were lucky if you got a quarter as an allowance per week. That's a lot of money. But anyway, so moving forward, a thing that Rosemary sees in the plant room as she's going through is this little note that's kind of sticking out, and it says that I could no longer associate with myself, which we don't know what that means, but it is zoomed in on. It's kind of hard to read unless you can read cursive, which we can't. Any strange events? Oh, so they decide to take the apartment because Rosemary falls in love with it. They move in, and it kind of cuts to Rosemary sitting down in the basement washing laundry, because this apartment complex has one laundry room down in the basement where the dead infant was found. And she meets a supporting character known as Terry, lives with their older next door neighbors as an adopted daughter of sorts named the Cassavetes. And she wears this like pendant around her neck that was given to him, been living with him forever. She's like a rehabilitated drug addict. And
it apparently stinks. I can't remember what was the
Tannis root.
Tannis root, which comes up pretty often throughout the entire movie.
Heavy topic in the movie.
But it apparently smells, but it's a good luck charm of some sort. And they agree that the basement creeped both of them out, and so they're going to come down and do laundry together. Then it cuts to later that night where Rosemary and Guy are in their bedroom, and they look like they're about to have some intimate time.
Yeah.
Some kissing.
And then you hear through the wall in their bedroom the next door neighbors talking, which is very important throughout the entire movie, that because this used to be one giant like apartment, and it's been split in two. So on the other side of this apparently very thin wall, you can hear the goings on of the other apartment. And so
was this when they heard the chanting?
Yes. So they hear them talking, and then, you know, they're like, oh, that was weird, and they start going back to kissing, and then they start hearing like chanting and like slight music, like almost like a ritualistic chanting from beyond, and they just kind of stare at the wall, and then it cuts away. Then we cut to Rosemary and Guy out on the town, and as they come back to the apartment, there's like this large gaggle of people outside, and there's a bunch of cops, and they make their way to the front where they find Terry. She has jumped and unalived herself from the 7th floor, and you see her laid out on the cement. It's actually pretty graphic for 1968.
Yeah, and the effects were actually pretty good too. Like,
yeah.
Normally, like when you see something like that, it's kind of aged. You're like, that looks a little rough, but it looked pretty. Like the effect, however they did it, it looked really good.
But when they, you know, Rosemary's a little distraught because this is just somebody she's just met and was going to become friends with. And then
they made like they were both scared of the basement, so they were like, let's make plans to come down here together and do our laundry, and we'll be like good buddies. And so it was upsetting to her that she had just lost somebody she just met.
And then we meet two other supporting characters, Roman Cassavet as well as Minnie Cassavet, which are the elderly couple that Terry stayed with. Minnie is a very interesting character that we will talk about a couple of times. And Roman is kind of a more reserved person. But they don't seem really distraught over the death, to be honest. Like, they seem upset.
It's just like,
yeah, like, oh, poor girl. Anyway, moving on. Gotta forgive and forget. You know what I mean? It's very weird. Especially like when you get to the end of the movie and you think back on it, it's a lot to like take in.
I just kind of put that together. That was something I was gonna mention. I was like, man, they sure aren't really acting too upset over it. They're just like, oh, darn.
Darn.
Dang. There she went.
it's at this point, like after that, and they kind of go back upstairs, it's revealed that Rosemary is and Guy are currently trying to have kids. They're planning to have children sometime in the future. And Mrs. Cassavet shows up to thank Rosemary for all the kind words that she said about Terry to them, and invites her and Guy over for dinner, which Rosemary agrees to. Guy doesn't want to, and she kind of guilt trips him into it. So when they go to visit, one thing I found very interesting that kind of comes up at the end is that Rosemary points out that all of their pictures are missing. There's like no pictures on the walls where she could tell that there were some, and there was only like one picture, but it was out of place. So she makes note of that, kind of feels unnerved by the dinner, and
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and then but Guy is seen talking to Roman, like hearing his stories.
He like instantly gets attached to this old man. Like,
yeah,
he's like immediately, like, you can see a connection between the two.
And Guy actually decides to go visit Roman the next day to hear more stories, and they cancel plans with their other friends. And Rosemary decides to stay behind, which then she gets like kind of interrupted in her alone time by Mrs. Cassavet, by Minnie, and also another friend.
At this point, you start getting the vibe of, uh-oh. Like, this lady, it's not that you're necessarily suspicious of her, but it's just like, is she gonna be like the annoying neighbor? Like, is she gonna come interrupt me every 5 seconds?
Yeah. And it's during this visit that Rosemary's kind of interrupted by Minnie and her friend, that Minnie actually gives Rosemary the good luck charm that smells that belonged to Terry, which is a very important thing. And, you know, Guy's starting to act a little suspect for slight reasons. And, you know, he tells her that she should wear the necklace, that if you accepted the necklace, then you should wear it, but she decides to put it away for now. Also, just right before this, Guy comes in and says, oh, I've been so focused on my career, let's have a baby. And they circle 2 dates on the calendar. This is when we're going to have a baby. We're going to make a baby. So after that, Minnie gives her the necklace, and then it kind of cuts to another day where they're planning to consummate, I guess. And Guy gets a phone call, and it's revealed that somebody who got a part that he was after, that was kind of talked about earlier in the movie, has mysteriously gone blind and can no longer do the part. So he is up for it. And so he takes it. And then...
And that was something we didn't mention, is that he was auditioning for a role in a play. He didn't get it, but now the person who did get the role went blind, so he is now...
He's up to bat, so to say. So in order to celebrate this, they have a dinner together. Minnie stops by.
Of course.
We don't see her, but we hear her off screen. And Rosemary's like, "Don't let her in." And she's like,
"She's already starting to be like, oh my gosh."
Yeah. And but Minnie gives them this dessert, these chocolate mousses for them to eat, and they begin eating them. Guy finishes his really quick.
He eats his food so fast. I said that every time you see him eat in this movie, but it's like every time you see him eat in the movie, he'd be eating my speed. He'd be like, even at the beginning, before like anything crazy's going on, like he's eating with the landlord, he was scooping mac and cheese onto his plate. He's just like, I'm like, God dang, man.
For such a fit and skinny dude, he sure does eat fast.
He does. Like, you won't unsee it now that we've pointed that out.
But Rosemary, while she's eating her dessert, she notices that there's an undertaste, which I've never heard someone call it an undertaste. But she says that there's a chalky undertaste and doesn't want to eat it. Then Guy has this suspicious thing of like, oh, she slaved all day, you might as well eat it. Just shut up and eat it.
Yeah, very insistent. Like, they get into a little bit of an argument.
And she's like, oh, if it's going to be such a big deal, then I'll eat it. And she pretends to eat it. And then when his back's turned, she scoops it into this napkin. And we later see her like dumping it into the trash can. And then she starts getting dizzy, almost like she's been drugged. And then, Guy said, oh, we got to watch the booze for you, and takes her to bed. And then we have this like,
she completely passes out on the ground. And I wanted to say that was a good stunt job. However, like she just fell on the floor like that. Whoever, I don't know if that was the actress who played her, if that might have been a stunt double to do that where she fell. But like, you know, it's so hard to like not catch yourself when you're trying to fall, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like she straight up, it looks like somebody just boom, like it was really cool.
Yeah,
Like,
no. It's not a huge stunt compared to what we're used to.
and her husband is being very calm about this. Like it's this lady just, like I was explaining, just flopped onto the floor, passed out. And he's like, "Oh, you just had too much to drink. That's all it was."
Gotta watch out, Alki.
She was completely fine.
But, you know, he takes her to bed and lays her down, and she's just like, "I'm just gonna take a nap. What about us making the baby today?" And he's like, you know, "Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine." And then we have this really like psychedelic trip where she's like on a boat.
It's a long psychedelic trip.
And then it's like she's seeing her friend Hutch, and he's not allowed on the yacht. It's weird.
It's very weird.
And then it cuts to her going below deck, and there's a bed, and she lays on it. And then out of the shadows of this room come all these naked old people standing around her, and some of them you've seen before. And you see her husband, and you see Minnie, and you see someone start drawing symbols on Rosemary's naked body. And then she is... How do I say this? Some creature that is not explained does some things that we cannot really clarify on. And then it cuts to the next morning.
And this could all, of course it's not, but this could all be a dream in her perspective.
But we're in a horror movie. We're a horror movie channel. We wouldn't have a story if that's where it ended. But it's revealed the next morning that apparently, you know, Guy...
I didn't realize how hard this would be to talk about.
Yeah, it's one of those things where...
It's a product of its time a little bit.
It really is.
Just with this one moment, it is a little uncomfortable for like a modern viewing, but you know, you got to look at it for the time. It's
Guy assaulted her in her sleep against her will. That's the best way we can put it. We cut to the next morning, and Rosemary is undressed, and she has scratches on her back, and Guy claims that he clipped his fingernails, that everything's good, and that, you know, when she asks about, you know, I thought we were gonna, you know, have the intimate time to make a baby, he said, "Oh, we did." Which in modern times, that is not a good, you know,
it's pretty rough.
Anyway, moving on. So
you know what we're saying.
Yeah, she gets upset about it. You know, he's like, "Oh, I didn't want to miss the time," even though they had 2 dates circled and it was the first day. But we're moving on. So then it cuts to, you know, she goes to a doctor's appointment just for a general checkup, and then it's revealed that she's pregnant, which is good news to everybody involved. But Guy is starting to act a little suspect now that he's like practicing for a new role. Apparently he hasn't looked at her all day. There's something going on, and Rosemary's feeling a little bit on edge. So when this is all going on, the Cassavetes come over once again to visit.
Also, you can't forget, once Guy figures out, he immediately wants to tell Minnie and what was the husband?
Roman.
I don't know why I keep forgetting his name, but he immediately wants to go across the hall and tell their old neighbors that she's had a baby.
And they come over, and they're Minnie's like, "Do you have a doctor yet?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm seeing Dr. Hill." And she's like, "Oh, you can't see Dr. Hill, who's a nobody. Why don't you go see this doctor?" And she suggests a doctor that the Cassavetes are really close friends with, and they call and they make an appointment for the next day. And then Guy covers for all of it, saying that he'll call Dr. Hill and, you know, make up an excuse as to why you're not going to see him anymore. So Rosemary goes to see the doctor, and he prescribes her a vitamin drink. Says that he doesn't want her on any kind of pills. He subscribes a vitamin drink that Minnie will make, and she drinks it.
Yeah, very suspicious.
Yeah.
This is once you're getting to the point of something's up, something's going on, but you don't know what.
And then Rosemary gets a visit from an old friend, Hutch, who, he comes in, they talk about all the stuff and that she's looking like she's lost a little bit of weight and that the doctor's saying it's normal. And he seems suspicious of the whole thing when Roman shows up, comes in, meets Hutch, and they talk about the good luck charm and how it smells and the tannis root. And he's like, it looks like a fungus or some kind of mold.
Mm-hmm.
And, Roman excuses himself, and then, Hutch and Rosemary are having coffee when Guy comes home in a rush and he still has makeup on, and Rosemary's like, why, they cut early is what he said. They had to do a rewrite. And Hutch excuses himself, grabs the jacket, and he can't find one of his gloves, but he just kind of writes it off and he goes home. Later that night, Hutch actually calls Rosemary while she's not feeling well in bed and says that he needs to meet her in front of a building in public to have a conversation. So Rosemary makes up some lies the next morning to Minnie about her vitamin drink and goes out and it waits for him. And when the time comes, Hutch doesn't show. So she goes and finds a phone booth and she calls Hutch. Turns out he fell ill in the middle of the night and is in the hospital in a coma, mysteriously.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at this point, she kind of is freaking out a little bit. She's starting to think that she's being followed, and she kind of starts roaming around the town when she runs into Minnie, who's out on the town, and she's not feeling well. So Minnie's like, why don't we just go home? So, it seems like Minnie's following her in some kind of capacity. And so it cuts again to later, and we see that Rosemary is eating raw meat.
Yeah, that scene really got under my skin. I hated that.
It happens twice. She barely sears a steak.
The steak wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Oh, it was bad.
It was bad.
She put that thing on a pan for like 2 seconds each side. Threw that thing on a plate.
That's how I like my steak, man. I'm just kidding. Not that raw.
Look, I'm a medium rare kind of guy, not a rare or, mooing at me kind of dude.
Yeah,
I mean, I like a little moo,
I
but
think it's still kicking.
It's
yeah.
cold. It had some ice on it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Ain't
What?
even
Like an
thawed out
ice
yet.
block straight out of the meat freezer. Breaks the tooth.
Breaks like a candy bar.
Yeah.
But we see this really interesting scene. I don't know if it's at this point or a little later, but she's eating like raw liver.
Yeah, that's
Like,
the one that it looks like
Yeah.
a red gelatin almost. It's just like wiggling in her hand, and then oh man. Mm-mm.
But at this point in the movie, it's almost like every time you turn around, the Cassavetes are there. The Cassavetes are involved. They're trying to talk to Rosemary. They're spending time together. So Rosemary decides that she wants to organize a party that is just for their young friends, and we have a really funny scene where she's like, anyone over the age of 60 isn't invited. You have to be 60 or under to get in. And whenever, Minnie comes over and sees all this preparation for the party, she's like, oh, what are you doing? And she's like, I'll help you take coats. I'll, be involved. She's, determined to be involved.
She has to be a part of it.
And then Rosemary's like, no, you do enough for me. This is our thing. Don't worry about it. And she's like, well, if you change your mind, and gets shooed out, basically. At the party, everybody keeps commenting on how bad Rosemary looks, and Rosemary eventually has a crying fit in the kitchen where all the girls lock her husband out, and she talks about the fact that she's been in pain since November, and all the ladies there are like, this is not normal.
Yeah, they're like, what? You've been in pain? You should have gotten this checked a long time ago.
And so they advise that she gets a second opinion later on
By Dr. Hill.
By Dr. Hill, the original doctor. And her and Guy have an argument about this a little later in the night after everybody leaves. And then in the middle of the argument, the pain stops. And she notes it, the pain is just gone.
Yeah, it's just an instant, you see her just smile, and it's just then we get a little bit of a happy montage.
No, but right before that, there's something that's so subtle you barely catch it. She talks about the pain stops when the baby starts moving. And she's like, oh my God, I can feel it moving. And she's talking to Guy about how excited he is. She is that the baby's moving and it's alive, because she's been worried that there's something wrong. And Guy has this moment where he's like, she forces him to touch her stomach, and then he yanks his hand away. Like, oh, I felt that. He doesn't want to look at it. He doesn't want to touch it. He's acting very, he acts like he's scared of the baby.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, I didn't think about it in the time, but it makes sense.
Now that you know how it ends, it's
Yeah.
It's a movie that is definitely, I think, it might be even better on a rewatch because now you can see these little things like we've been breaking down. It's like, man, I didn't notice that. I
definitely liked it better my second time around. I think the mystery of it the first watch was like, it's gone when you watch it again, obviously, which is probably why you picked up on some suspense things that I didn't. But like at the same time, I knew what was coming, and so I knew what I was looking for, and it was.
It's like Hereditary. Every time you watch that movie, I swear you pick up something new every time.
And then we get a happy montage where it's like, they're getting ready for the baby. Everything seems normal. She's taking her medicine with the vitamin drink.
Yeah,
she just kind of falls into this rhythm, and she completely forgets about Hutch, who's in a coma, until she gets a phone call after the happy montage where it's revealed that he died. But she goes to the funeral and is a little late, and the lady who she spoke to on the phone that informed her about the coma gives her this book that Hutch apparently woke up in the middle of the coma and said to deliver this to Rosemary, and that simply saying the name is an anagram.
The title is an anagram.
No, he says the name is an anagram.
It's the title, but then she finds out it's the name that he's referring to. Because remember, she starts with
No, literally the message said that the name is an anagram.
And she thinks it's
she
the
thinks
name
it's
of,
the
she
okay.
thinks
Okay,
it's
I
the
was
name
I
of
was
the
getting
book.
mixed up. Okay.
So just like you did, she assumed that it was the book title. Anyway, she goes home, she unboxes the book, and it's All Them Witches.
And of course, Minnie had to come and take a look at this book.
She didn't know what the book was.
Yeah, she didn't open the package, but she was there. It was like, oh god.
Yeah.
So, she pulls out these Scrabble things and puts All Them Witches up.
Yeah, that's something that's hinted at earlier. They play Scrabble, and it's kind of funny that it came back and it's used to piece together.
And so she's trying to do this with the title of the book, and nothing's coming up. And so she finds I forget what it's called, but an earmarked page, and it's a picture of Adrian Mercado, and then on the back of it is a family portrait where it's revealed that he has a son named Stephen, and it's underlined. And so she spells out Stephen Mercado and then rearranges it.
Yeah, she does this 4 or 5 times, trying to. There's some funny ones she does. She's like, that don't make no sense.
But once she gets to Stephen Mercado, she quickly pieces it together, and it spells out Roman Cassavet, which is their old neighbor next door, the male. So it's revealed that, at least at this point in the movie, that it is suspected that Roman is the son of the witch who was killed outside of the building, not in the library, the lobby that Hutch thought, but the book confirms it was outside. And so then at this point things start to spiral completely. She goes to her doctor and is like, I don't want these people around my baby anymore. It's unsafe.
This is the doctor that Minnie recommended, of course.
And the doctor's like, oh, I understand, as any mother would. But also it kind of helps the Cassavets out because they're leaving on a trip to go visit Roman's favorite cities because he's very ill and probably only has a month or 2 left to live. So it works out. And so there's this goodbye sequence where the Cassavets leave to go visit these cities. And Rosemary goes into full sleuth mode when Guy gets rid of the book that Hutch gave her. It's almost like a tipping point where it's like, oh, you got rid of the book. Now I'm going out.
Threw it in the garbage.
Yeah, she goes out, buys the same book and another one, and starts researching. And she believes from one of the books that the Coven, which Roman and all them are a part of, are responsible for Peter, the guy who took the role in the beginning, is responsible for their blindness and also Hutch's coma and ultimate death.
Yeah, the book states that these covens can cause blindness, comas. There was
Yeah,
5 or 6
a
things.
paralysis.
Yeah, just
But the thing is that they need an object that belongs to the person. So let me make sure that I don't have this yet. Okay, yeah. So to prove her theory right, she calls Peter, the former actor, and it turns out that her husband Guy and him met for
real
drinks.
quick, there was a funny little dark joke when he picked up the phone, and she was like, "How are you doing today?" He's like, "Well, I've only broke 6 glasses, so it's
Yeah.
not too bad." Like that was pretty funny. I was like, "That's a dark joke." That's pretty.
Yeah, it's
funny.
pretty messed up. But
it was funny.
you know,
he meant it in a lighthearted way, just kind of like laughing at himself almost.
yeah, if you'll cry about it if you can't laugh about it.
Yeah.
But it's revealed that Guy and him actually met for drinks, and they traded ties. Accidentally traded ties. So Guy has his tie, and he has Guy's tie. And so then Rosemary starts piecing together that these missing objects could be being taken by Guy to be performed in these rituals. So she goes to the doctor, this doctor that Minnie recommended, and she threw away the charm when she went into full sleuth mode.
Threw it down the drain.
And the receptionist comments on the fact that she smells different and that she smells better, and that she hopes that the doctor takes after her. That apparently he smells very similar to Rosemary in his aftershave.
Same sketchy doctor.
Yeah, same sketchy doctor, which at this point Rosemary has this moment of realization that he's in on it too.
Mm-hmm.
And so she makes up an excuse, leaves, goes to a phone booth again, calls Dr. Hill, and we have these creepy sequences where there's this guy standing out listening.
Yeah, she's calling Dr. Hill and telling him like everything that's going on, and she's like, "I need an appointment now." And this was the scariest part in the movie to me. It's just like oh god, no. Like there's just, it's Roman standing outside the phone booth.
I don't think it was Roman. I think it was the doctor.
Was it the doctor?
I think so, because of the curly hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could have been, yeah.
It could have been any of them, really.
Yeah.
It was one of the cult members, but he had his back turned so you couldn't see his face. That's why we don't know. But he walks off. Like, she sees this man and she gets scared. Then he walks off, and someone new who's coincidentally, he's an innocent dude, but he was coincidentally wearing the same like suit, and he comes and stands there, and she's like, "Oh, okay, thankfully." They heard her on the phone, so they were already tipped off.
So she goes to Dr. Hill's office, unloads this crazy story about the witches, and he's like, "I'll help you. I'll get you sent off to a safer place. Not a mental institution like we thought, but he's actually like planning for her to have an escape plan." So she's hopeful. So she goes to this room, takes a nap, wakes up with Dr. Hill like 30 minutes to an hour later, and Dr. Hill opens the door, and in steps her old crazy doctor and Guy, her husband.
She did tell him about her old doctor, so I wonder if he called him because it's like, oh, he knows about this lady. So at first I thought maybe Dr. Hill might have been in on it too, and then I would have been like, oh my gosh, this whole city.
Yeah, this whole city's against Rosemary.
Yeah.
That's almost what this movie wants you to feel like. It's like,
everyone's
it's hopeless.
against her.
It's literally hopeless.
But the doctor and Guy take Rosemary back to the hotel, kind of against her will. And is at this point that she kind of pulls like this crazy plan out of a hat, where she like opens her purse and dumps her stuff all over the floor, and they're trying to scramble and pick it up. And while that happens, she runs behind the elevator guy, because this is at a time where elevators were operated by someone. And she operates the elevator herself up to the 7th floor, hops off, unlocks her thing, and just as she closes the door, the husband and the doctor have made their way up the stairs and shuts it in front and locks it.
Good chase sequence.
Yeah.
Intense.
Yeah, it's a good suspense moment. And so she goes and tries to call a friend, probably trying to manipulate an escape plan. At this point, she's like 3 days out from her birth. And, she's like on the phone with somebody waiting for them to respond. And then you just see 2 random people skip
like tiptoeing almost.
across the screen.
That also got under my skin pretty bad. I hate that kind of stuff.
Just
in
to,
a good way.
To mention it for the second time in this channel's history, it just seemed like the old lady from It Chapter 2 just, skipping around in the background.
Give me an old person in the background, and I swear it's the scary. In Hereditary, the old lady in the corner.
Yeah.
In It Chapter 2, that's the scariest.
Just
part of the
luckily,
movie.
this time around, they're not naked.
Yeah, they weren't naked. They were well dressed.
Yeah. They seem like well-to-do people.
Well, they're probably wealthy because of
stuff. But there's this kind of like struggle sequence where the doctor's going to sedate her, which I just gotta say, this whole scene threw me off the first time and this time because there's an actress here that is in the Andy Griffith Show. And she she's in from here to the rest of the end of the movie, and I'm just like, no, not you, anybody but you. You're supposed to be innocent, damn it.
Yep.
But anyway. So, they try to sedate her, and all of a sudden, boom, she goes into labor. Like, full-blown panicking, like, take me to a hospital, it needs to be at a hospital, and she goes unconscious. And she wakes up the next morning, she's had the baby.
Her husband's sitting on the edge of the bed just smiling at her.
Yeah. The baby's been born.
At first, he's like, yeah, it's been born. He's alive. It's a boy.
Mm-hmm.
But then later, who's the one that comes in?
She's the lady with the glasses that has appeared a couple times. I think her name is like, not Thelma Louise, but it's like
something like
it's
that.
It's like Louise something.
It's like a double name, something Louise.
It's an old
classic,
double name.
Yeah, one of those like classic sounding names.
Yeah.
But she goes out to get the doctor and brings him back in, and it's revealed that there was complications after birth and that the baby died.
He said if they would have done it in a hospital, the baby probably would have lived, even though she was.
But he also turned the blame on her and said, "But you were having none of it." Like it was her fault.
It's almost like they were trying to rewire her brain for a few days. They were like, maybe we can make her forget about all this.
Yeah.
But
that's what I was kind of picking up on that.
Rosemary's built of tougher stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we see her, kind of healing in bed, and I think she's watching TV. And she starts to hear a baby cry coming from an apartment, either above or beside, through that wall.
It sounded above to me, like she was looking up.
Yeah, like that wall. You can hear it kind of through the walls that we have already established that are very thin. So at this point, right before this happens, the doctor, this information is given by Guy. Apparently the doctor said that she had prepartum hysteria, which I don't know if that's even a real thing, but that's what's caused her to be this way with the witches and all that other jazz. Something really interesting is that, she is lactating. And so they're like draining the milk and then they're taking it away, and that she's asking, well, since the baby's dead, what are you doing with the milk? And they're like, oh, we throw it away. But then she tries to like put her dirty spoon into it, and they're like, no, don't do that. Why? We don't want it to get messy.
Yeah.
And they take it away, never to be seen again. But it's kind of at this point.
She's also hiding pills. They're slipping her these pills, and she's got like a little crevice to her side, and she pretends to take him and like slips them, and they're it reminds me of Misery, where he's like slipping the pills into the mattress.
Yeah.
Great movie. We have to cover it someday. But at this point, she's super suspicious, doesn't trust anyone, reasonably so. And so when nighttime falls, she pretends like she goes to sleep because the pills put her to sleep. And she goes on an escape escapade where she goes back to the same closet from the beginning, and she finds a hidden door that leads into the apartment next door, the Cassavetes. And as she goes in, you see all these witchcraft style satanic paintings that are hung.
A weird like Renaissance looking upside down cross down the hall.
Yeah. And there's like earlier during the whole psychedelic trip, when she passes by a window, you see like flames on a building, and you actually see the painting that looks like. And she grabs a knife, and she like rounds a corner into this like party room where the Cassavetes are there. Everybody's there.
Oh
and,
yeah, it's a huge group. There's even
Huge.
people we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, and the lady from Andy Griffith is sitting there and saying like, Rosemary, what are you doing out of bed? You're not supposed to be out here. And we see this really cool, I wish I had this crib growing up, black crib with an upside down cross like dangling on the inside, which that is such a metal freaking cradle. Like, what? I wish I had that. That's so cool. If I ever have children, you best believe. But you know, she's like holding the knife up to everybody, and Roman comes up and is like, well, we'll get to that in just a second. So she like makes her way over to the crib and opens it, like expecting to see her baby, and then she reels back with this face of utter horror, and she starts screaming like, "What did you do to it? What did you do to its eyes?" And then Roman just pipes up casually, "It has his father's eyes." And we're like, you know, at this point we're like, what's going on? Like, because all this is unraveling very quickly.
You do see a flash. It's like a split second of like a demon's eyes
that we saw earlier in the movie during the sequence. And she's like, you know, but Guy has normal eyes. And then he's like, Guy's not not his father. Satan is its father. And then they start chanting, "Hail Satan," and all this other jazz. Like, it's very cult-like. And, you know, Rosemary's like having a full-on breakdown at this point. Like, no, you know. And Roman comes over and is like, "Why don't you help us out? Why don't you be the mother to your son? You don't have to join the club. Just be a mother to your baby." And, you know, Thelma Louise or whoever her freaking name is over there being an utter,
He's like, "Ah!"
just being a total teetotal bitch to Rosemary. And she's like shaking the crib violently as the baby's fucking crying. And, you know, Rosemary...
Little demon baby.
Yeah, it's implied that there's something up with the baby's hands and feet, which I'm assuming are hooves.
Yeah.
And, you know, Rosemary comes over and it's like, you know, you're rocking him too fast. And she's like, "Go sit down. Go be where you belong." And Roman's like, "Let her rock him." And so she comes over and starts rocking the crib, like staring at the baby. Oh, by the way, before we get to the end, Guy comes over, confirms that he's been working with this the whole time, and it's just like, you know, "It'll all be worth it, honey." And then she straight up spits in this man's face. And it's like
you just want one win for this lady this whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, come on.
and that's the only one you get, but it's so like, yes, spit in his face, Rosemary, take back your power.
He did this all without her even like acknowledging anything.
I feel like if, you know, she would have been in on it, it would have been way different.
He's also promising her like, "Oh, we're gonna go live in Hollywood, we're gonna be in the big time," and he's like, "Now we can have kids and stuff.
Now
like
we can
that."
have a normal life and a pool and a mansion and all this other
He's
jazz.
like-
And so she just straight up spits in his
So he
face.
basically sacrificed their first baby to essentially hit the big time and
Insert
Wow.
big time rush right here. But we have this really nice sequence where, you know, she's rocking the cradle and she's looking in at this presumable monster baby that we never see.
it's the Antichrist.
Yeah.
It's literally the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And she kind of looks like a mother looking at her son. And as she's rocking, we get the strange, ominous, like, vocal trilling that we got at the very beginning as it kind of zooms beyond out into the city once again, and credits roll. And that is the end of Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, something there with the end. I'm very happy they didn't show the baby. I was like, please don't ruin this by showing a 60s practical effect or CG looking like little demon baby. I was like, please don't show it. I love that they kept it a mystery. That lets your mind paint a picture of what it might look like.
Even though, you know, hands down, if they were to ever remake this movie, they would show it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it would be ruined.
Those kind of, like, question hanging in the air at the end, like, they don't do that anymore. Not really.
In my opinion, this whole movie, from the get-go, I was joking before I even pieced together what it was about. I was instantly like, this is reminding me a lot of Hereditary and Toni Collette's character in Hereditary, how she's like this mom and this cult. We'll talk about Hereditary another day, but
Yeah.
that's instant. Like, almost this Hereditary almost feels like an advanced remake of this movie in a way.
Yeah,
But once
kinda.
again, we're not talking about Hereditary though.
But it's just the whole movie, especially as the whole spirals. Like, you just feel so bad for Rosemary.
It's done so well. Like we were saying earlier, it's like it almost feels like the entire city is against this lady. Nothing can go right. Like she's trying to have this baby, and that's really all she cares about. But it's like as soon as something positive happens, something bad happens, and it's like she's just surrounded by sketchy people everywhere. Like it was even to a point where I'm still kind of questioning, is Dr. Hill on the...
It's never confirmed, so I'm gonna say no.
Probably not, but it's
He wasn't in the room at the end, so
Yeah.
if he was a part of it, I think that would, like, the coming of their Lord and Savior
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
It's still just like a sense of even a normal person, they're looking at her like you're insane, but
Yeah.
it's so good.
Now, I will say, you know, our editor D-Mac, he watches all of our movies with us, and he pointed out something really nice, because there was one point during the movie where Zombie Cat looked at me and was like, you know, it's kind of the dialogue's a little choppy, you know, or a little weird, and it's like, well, you just got to remember that acting styles were different then. This was made in the 60s.
This seems almost on. This movie feels very modern for its time, though. Like, if you fancied up the visuals a little bit, that you couldn't have told me this wasn't made in like the 90s or something. Like,
I think I could buy 80s.
even
Yeah.
80s, yeah.
It's just
I
the
don't know.
quality of like the camera and the shots and stuff. You can
just-
tell it's vintage. You just, you know, yeah.
It was shot really well. Cinematography was beautiful in this movie. It gave me Candyman vibes with a lot of the music. This movie's got a lot of like groovy, like jazz music. It's scary though. I can't explain it. It fits like the New York City kind of vibe. But
It's almost like Broadway-esque.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like there's these
Or like
scary
underground jazz club.
Yeah.
in the chase sequence we mentioned with them trying to catch her through the elevator. That whole sequence, I was bobbing my head, but at the same time, I was like, "Go, go, go!" But the music was like, man, that's got like a good like thump to it. It just the whole soundtrack is
But like,
great.
I forget what it's called, but the song that plays at the beginning with the vocal trilling that plays at the end, like, it has like a supernatural, almost haunting quality, and it really sets the stage for what is about to happen, and is a great thing of like leading us into the mystery of what happens after.
I know, because now you're left wondering what's going to happen now that Devil Baby is literally on Earth.
Yeah, like, where's he at, you know? But I don't know how they would do it, but honestly, if they ever made like a sequel to Rosemary's Baby, where
I think maybe a prequel could do even better.
maybe a prequel, maybe a sequel, but like
Because a sequel, then they're gonna have to go into like, I'd like to see maybe like Roman's origin
Yeah.
or something. I
Yeah.
don't know how you could really make that scary.
But see, like, the cheesy 80s slasher fan in me wants them to make like a total just jump forward sequel where there's like this demon that's grown up, like flying around New York City killing people in like an old 1980s like slasher fashion. Like, I'd go see that. What?
I know, but it would take away from what this movie
Yeah.
set up.
No.
That's not what this movie is.
No. This is a lot more of a psychological horror.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like
it's,
atmosphere horror.
It's the exact opposite of what he was saying.
Yeah, that's why it's funny. You know?
Like, there's no kind of like slasher vibe in this.
No.
It's not necessarily scary, but I was scared the entire time from like beginning to end with the creepy music and ending on the creepy music. I was like glued. I was like, man, like I was saying earlier, it's shot so well. The music is beautiful and catchy, but scary at the same time. You're in your brain for a first time experience. You're like, what's going on? Like, you're trying to piece all this together. You're kind of just clueless because so much is happening.
Something I love about this movie is that there is zero jump scares.
No.
This movie entirely relies upon story horror, like the horror of just what is happening and unfolding before you, and atmosphere and timing. Horror timing, like the guy standing behind the phone booth and then walking away as the other guy that looks very similar comes up. Like that is
the two old men walking past
like
the
that is
doorway
just...
that I said scared me so bad. And it's like, you didn't need a loud bang from music to scare me. It's like, we mentioned this in our Late Night with the Devil review. It's like, when a jump scare is done right, I'm okay with it. But when it's just needlessly there, it's like, this just felt so like good, like so well crafted for its time. Like, man, it was really good. I love this movie a lot.
All right, well, that is our synopsis and our talking about the plot itself. So let's dive into the review. Now, our first category up, as always, is story. Now, what did you rate the story, Zombie Cat?
I'm going based off of its time, so I'm gonna give it the benefit of time. If it was now, it'd probably get a little bit low, but for its time, this was probably very edgy. So I'm gonna give it like an 8, because, like I said, for its time, this is probably pushing a lot of buttons. I imagine a lot of like.
Well, it's the '60s. When have you ever seen Hail Satan in a movie?
I know, it's like seeing a scene like that is like so out of place in something like a 60s movie. It's like, man,
it's even like a little, like, I'm not gonna say totally taboo, but like being so straight up about it, like even that's a little taboo today.
Even when people make like a satanic styled like music video and stuff, like people will get riled up about that. So I can't, even like some of the later Hellraiser movies, like I know the one where he's in the church and he spreads his arms like Jesus, that caused a bit of a fiasco. But it's like, for the 60s, if you were like somewhat of a religious person and you went and saw this, I imagine hearing like Hail Satan, that probably messed you up a little bit. So I'm thinking about it from the time period. Solid 8.
So solid
very
8.
unique.
Okay.
Very good 8.
So, wow, I'm surprised that I'm actually about to say this. I gave it a 9 for story. And for the same reason, take into account the time that this movie was made. Like, I really had to sit and think about it when I was scoring this. This came out before The Exorcist, before Hereditary, before all these movies that we've mentioned. So really, we could be reviewing right now that the movie that's responsible for these movies even existing.
There might be, I'm sure there's at least something that was maybe before this.
Oh, I'm sure there was.
I'm sure like witchcrafty movies probably go back to who knows how long, but it's like, this feels like the first kind of one in that weird psychological stepping stone that led to movies like Hereditary, Paranormal Activity, all that kind of Coven styled stuff.
I just really don't think that we would have, like, I don't know why, but it's just like knowing when it came out, seeing how they structured the story and all the elements around it. I don't know about The Exorcist, but I know for a fact that we probably would not have movies like Hereditary without this movie existing.
Yeah, Hereditary feels heavily inspired by this movie now that I've seen it.
So I feel like for its time, I have to give it a 9, because like at that time, if it wasn't for stuff like this, we wouldn't have the things that we
I would have
today,
loved to have been just like, imagine being maybe our age in 68 when this came out. Like, man, this would have been like, it would be our Hereditary essentially. Like we had a Hereditary and we were like blown away by how intricate the story is. This is probably that experience for the 60s. It's like,
I just feel really bad for this movie a little bit, because I'm sure that it had its moment in the sun and its own popularity, but I really genuinely believe that this movie has been forgotten about because of The Exorcist, because it came out so like a little before it.
When people think of the classic demonic movie The Exorcist, that's the one.
Which I'm not saying that The Exorcist doesn't deserve that title.
Even Amityville, I think I've heard more people reference that. I mean, that's not really, I guess a demon. It's a
Yeah,
ghost.
it's a ghost.
It's a ghost, like a poltergeist kind of deal or whatever. But yeah, for its time, very, very good. Like the story is so unique for its time. I love that.
So, I just want to point out that's the first time that I've ever given a higher score in story than he has, I think. So you gave it an 8, I gave it a 9, gives us an average of 8.5 for story. Now we move on to our second one, the characters. And now this one is one that I was a little harder on. So, why don't you go ahead and give your score for characters?
It's hard to say because I really liked the annoying old lady Minnie. Like, she's a character every time she's on screen. You get that, oh God feeling. It's like, here we go again, but it's in a good way, you know? It's like it's in a like scary way. It's like you're dreading when she's on screen. So
Yeah.
just her alone was great. And what was the actress who played Rosemary?
Mia Farrow.
She did a great job as Rosemary. She did a good job, and I also really liked her. I didn't really care for Guy too much, like outside of his character being a douchebag alone. Just
And the comedic relief, which we'll
Yeah.
get to.
I didn't care for too much, so I'd say like a 7.
Okay. We actually gave it the same score. I also gave characters a 7. Just to kind of like expand upon what you were saying, I just feel like they could have. I mean, obviously this movie's been around forever, so what can we say? But I feel like maybe if the characters were a little more in depth instead of surface level in some aspects. I mean, it worked.
Rosemary and Minnie are the star of the
Yes.
show, if you ask me. Those two characters, they're the, like, Minnie has like a super charming, like, sweet old lady vibe that can't help but make you smile. You're like,
And also
she's so
untrustworthy.
sweet, but at the same time, you're just like uncomfortable. You're like, man,
So, I gave it a 7, you gave it a 7, so that gives us an average of 7 for characters. Cool. Now moving on, we have antagonist, which I think for like our first time, I guess, we have a distinct antagonist.
I mean, well, I guess, are you counting Roman technically, or are you counting the Coven?
The
as a whole?
Coven. I think it's the Coven as a whole.
Yeah.
Because I don't even think we can classify Satan as the antagonist.
No, because they're
Yeah.
doing his bidding to get
Yeah.
benefits,
So
essentially.
without the Coven, none of this happened.
Yeah.
So I think it's the Coven.
Yeah, it's kind of like Paranormal Activity.
Mhm.
I'm gonna take time into the ranking, like, because if this was a new movie, it'd probably get like a 4, but I'd say like a 7 again, because I mean it's just witches, but it's just done so well that
Mhm.
you know, I think they really hit the nail on the head.
So-
Well, I also take back maybe giving it a 4, because if it's done right, once again, Hereditary, we
Right.
keep saying that movie over and over, I'm sorry, but I'm like, that movie did the same thing, and for me, that's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, it's probably in my top 5, so
yours is a 7?
yeah, I'm sticking with a 7.
I gave antagonist a 9. And my reason behind it is I had to take into account time. And it's the same kind of thing, so I was going over with the story, like, yeah, this is just a coven. Like, that is the enemies. But the way that this whole thing has been set up, that the whole feeling from beginning to end like this, the whole city against Rosemary, that everyone's in on this joke that Rosemary is a part of and she doesn't know it. It's just the puppets on a string feeling that I get from it. It's almost perfection to me, where it's like seeing, like, as the movie continues, you see the gears turning and you see how each movement of the pieces on the chessboard works, and it's all cornering her into an unescapable situation.
You could almost count the entire city as the antagonist, because the movie wants you to feel as if you're in her shoes. It's like we're following her, so it's like this whole time we're just captured in this bubble with her. It's like there's no escaping this craziness.
So the fact that a movie from the 60s captured that for me, and it was probably completely original at that point, or close enough, that, you know, that's kind of covens are a trope that we see a lot now. or have in the past like 20 years. So it's kind of hard to give a modern day movie that 9, but I think that with something that feels so vintage, it's easy, because like, who, for all we know, this could be the reason why it is a trope now. So therefore I give it a 9. So
Yeah, you know what? I think you saying that, I think I'll bump it up to an 8, especially since I was like, it's just done so well. Especially like we were saying, this is so edgy for its time. It's like this was probably a shell shock to people watching it.
I can totally imagine my grandmother, my old 80-something-year-old grandmother, sitting in the theater watching this when it came out, going, "Oh my God!"
Just hearing like they're all just chanting "Hail Satan." Like, I imagine that probably made some people walk out back in the day. It was,
Oh, I'm sure it did.
That's even watching it now, you're just like, whoa, they said
Well,
that,
you don't expect somebody to just like say "Hail Satan" and actually mean it.
I know it's normally
You
like
know?
a goofy like joke, you know what I mean?
Like at the end of one of the Tenacious D songs, where they're like, "Hail Satan, Hail Satan."
It's like just something goofy, like, metalheads saying stuff like that. It's nothing ever really that serious.
No, but these people in this room,
It's creepy almost.
yeah, they're like, it sounds like you just walked into a Baptist church, but of Satanism.
the opposite. The opposite. It's a bunch of old people too.
Yeah.
So I gave it a 9. You changed your score to an 8, which gives us a total of 8.5 for antagonist. Pretty high. Next up is humor. Now, I think this movie was funny. I think it could have been funnier, because there's only one comedic relief to the whole thing, and that's Guy. And I actually think that sometimes it's a little bit of a detriment to his character, because it kind of makes him seem like a douchebag rather than an actual funny guy. He's like a wise guy, but not funny.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a 6 in humor. Like, there was some parts I like straight up laughed out loud, like just some of the stuff Minnie would do, or just some of the jokes I thought were actually pretty funny. Not all of them, but there was a good bit of like humor in here that I feel like was intentional and not intentional.
Mhm.
So that it kind of like adds in, takes away at times. But we were mentioning like the blind joke where he's like, "Well, I only broke 6 glasses today, so it ain't too bad." It's like, dang.
Okay. So you gave it a 6.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give humor a 7. I really have nothing else to contribute to that. I think we feel pretty similarly about
Yeah.
this. So you gave it a 6. I gave it a 7. It averages out to 6.5 for humor. Now, scariness. This one is a little tricky, because as we discussed before we started recording, and also now through the whole video, like, this is a movie that is not traditionally scary. Like, at least not what we assume in today's world, where it's like jump scares galore, or like we actually like gasp or scream, or like almost want to hide our face under the covers.
Mm-hmm.
It's all atmosphere, and like the whole putting yourself in the shoes of what's going on in the moment, of like how horrifying this would be. Kind of like in Room Zero, how we talked about putting yourself in the shoes of these people who are having this first-hand account. That's where the horror lies.
Very intense, very suspenseful.
So for scariness, what'd you give it?
I can't lie. I told you I had the creeps from opening credits to closing credits, so I'm gonna give it a generous 8.
Okay.
Like, I wasn't scared, but I felt like spooked out. Like, it was very eerie from beginning to end. Like, I think it was just the cinematography and beautiful music, like, just mixed together. It just gave it this perfect eerie vibe that you can't shake. Like, I'm still kind of like, ooh, I got like a weird feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I thought it was really scary.
Okay. Cool. So you gave it an 8.
Mm-hmm.
As I hope all of you have figured out by now, when it comes to scariness in a movie, I'm a little bit of a tough nut to crack in terms of like how I feel about the scariness of a movie. I'm pretty brutal when it comes to how scary a movie is, which is why I gave this movie a 6 in terms of scariness. I don't know if it's just because it's my second time watching this movie, and maybe like the whole scary atmosphere is lost upon me now, because I know how it all goes, but I think that 6 is generous for me. So you gave it an 8.
You also didn't have the suspense of like what's going on here?
Yeah.
Mixed with the,
So, I mean, maybe take my score as like, and not with a grain of salt, but take it as somebody who's seen this movie before, like how it is coming back to it. But like we've established with most of the other horror movies that we reviewed so far, scariness is important to me, so I'm pretty brutal when it comes to how scary and how I rate it. So I think I've been pretty consistent on how I do my scariness when it comes to the reviewing. So I'm giving it a 6. You gave it a generous 8. I gave it above average 6, which leads us to an average of 7, which is pretty good for such an old movie.
Yeah, it really is. It's ominous. It's it gives you heebie-jeebies.
Now for our last category, we have experience, how we felt about the movie as a whole, as a horror movie fan coming to watch this movie. What do you think?
For me, it's a very easy 9. Like, I don't see how I could give it any lower or any higher because it's not perfect, but for its time, you have to take in, like, man, that was so, like, fresh and unique for the time, I bet. Like, I really, really loved that movie. So the music was great, cinematography was great. The characters weren't perfect, so once again, I'm like, it's not perfect, but for its time, just so unique, so edgy, very eerie and ominous. I really liked Rosemary. I liked Minnie. So yeah, there's no reason I can think of to drop it below a 9 because it's just so, like, good. It's genuinely just good.
Oh yeah, I actually agreed. I also gave it a 9 for experience. I like, for how much praise we've given it through this whole review, like, it's really hard to give this movie any less credit than I feel that it deserves, because as of right now, unless we're proven different, like, I think that this movie is responsible for a lot of the very popular, very well-loved horror movies that we have today.
Unless we just don't know about a huge one that might have came out before this.
Yeah, which, if you know something we don't, let us know in the comments down below.
This was before, like I said, The Exorcist and Amityville, so, like...
You'll have to fact-check Amityville.
Amityville was late 70s.
Was it really?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it might have been around the same time because of how, like, if you ever watch that movie, it's shot a certain way.
I know, that's why I was so surprised. This movie looks so modern for its time.
But all right, so we both gave it a 9 for experience, so that gives us an average of 9. I don't know if this is our highest rated at the time of this release, but it's up there. It's an up there horror movie in terms of what we've rated it. I agree with you. I think that the characters could have been better. I think that kind of took
some
away.
of the dialogue too. I forgot to mention some of the dialogue comes. There's some of it that's intentional, like we were saying with the girl who unalived herself, and then there were like, that's too bad. But then there's times, especially Guy, the way he would deliver lines. I'm like, I just think this guy's not a good actor. This guy.
I think that is a product of the time. I really do, because if you go back, like, we talked about this while we were watching the movie. This was made just as the golden age of TV and film was ending, and we were now starting the process into what is still going, I think, today, where it's like constantly evolving.
It's like the darker, like, serious tone. It feels more like it's not as over exaggerated, I guess. Is what I'm trying to think of. Like, what was the example we did? Like, when she found out she was pregnant, like, she was so high.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like, just super high pitched, excited.
Oh my God, Guy, can we keep it? Can we keep it?
Yeah. You'll know it when you watch it. You can't unhear it. It's just like,
if you've ever seen something from the golden age of movies, like an old school, The Wizard of Oz. If you've ever seen that acting, you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah,
it's very, like, it's not stage, but it's slightly even elevated for film. Yeah, it's like it reads as big. So, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but I think that, for its time and for its impact, that I feel that it deserves to.
Yeah, also take this score in the we're talking about for its time, which I still think it holds up, and it earned that 9 for me completely.
Oh yeah.
But I'm just saying, for its time, it definitely would
we can't sugarcoat this. If somebody were to make this same exact movie today, and this movie never existed, but this same movie came out tomorrow, it would have different scores.
It probably would. It really like. There's just something about, like we said, the way it's shot, etc. Like it in that time almost makes it like creepier.
Oh yeah, and knowing that it came out in the 60s makes it even scarier, you know, because you know, that's what my parents grew up during, you know, so it's like knowing that this was a movie that they saw when they were younger than us, you know, currently, that's pretty big. Seeing that on screen when you're like 19 years old, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So
all right, so now it's time we play our Rotten Tomatoes guessing game on what score this movie got. This is gonna be very hard. Very hard.
yeah,
Because I don't know.
because we're not like, I don't even know when this thing got a tomato score, so
A lot of people, they'll go back and do reviews on
Okay,
older
so-
movies, so
okay, all right, so starting off with critic score, right? Since
Yeah,
I've seen this movie, I want you to go first.
I'm gonna say, oh man, this is hard. This is definitely the hardest one so far. I'm gonna say 88 from critics and 83 from audience.
Okay,
I don't know why 80s is what I'm thinking.
I'm gonna say 85 for critics, and I'm gonna say 78 from audience.
Okay. The critic score is 96%.
Wow.
Damn!
That's
So
good.
it's near perfect. This movie did really well for the critics. And the audience score is 87%. So it did really well for audience too.
So
But it's it's continuing the trend of the critics are giving it a really good score. The audience is always just a little bit underneath.
This is so fucked because
we feel like before we ever started this, anytime, of course, you look at a horror movie on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics normally always give horror movies a hard time, while the audience
gives it a,
they're like, "Oh,
you
that
know,
was a good scare," you know. So
Yeah, usually the audience is a lot more forgiving, but it appears not to be that way in the past few times that we played this game.
especially with Grave Encounters 1, I expected that one to be
yeah.
a lot lower, but once again, that was kind of like for its time. Same with this movie. It was like,
you know what? If you're still here at this point, let's just face it. I suck at this game. This is like, I don't know how many times I've lost, but I've lost pretty much almost all of them. So, all right, guys. Well, that's been our review for Rosemary's Baby. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm glad I got to show Zombie Cat a movie that I've seen.
I know, it's normally the other way around. I told him to pick this time.
Yeah. So,
I'm happy I did because I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna buy it immediately. So
well, anyway, guys. So, be sure to like this video, comment. Let us know if you know something we don't about the history of horror movies, and see if this is actually responsible for all the things that we've given it credit for in this video.
yeah, once you go kind of below the 70s, that's where my knowledge kind of drops off a little bit.
I mean, I agree. Except for like Universal Monsters, which I hope I hope we cover those one day.
We'll get to everything.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
get to everything.
But be sure to like and follow on all social media. We have a Instagram over at the Horridin channel on Instagram. So be sure to like and follow over there just to kind of keep up to date on things we're doing in our real life escapades.
Also, thank you to these beautiful patrons. We have a Patreon if you would like to support and have your name at the end of every video. All funds go back into the channel. We all three work full-time jobs and have to take a small bit of time out of the week to make this happen. We just do it out of passion, essentially. So all funds are just going to go right back into the channel. But
yeah, so be sure, if you want to support the channel or be a part of what we're trying to grow here, be sure to go over there and check us out. And even if you subscribe to the lowest form, $5 helps. Like, everything helps, and we are greatly appreciative for you even to consider.
absolutely.
Is there anything else that we need to
Not that I can think of.
discuss? All right, guys, we got some big videos coming up planned in the future. More creepypastas are coming your way. More movie reviews are in the wings, waiting to be published by our lovely D-Mac behind the screen. D-Mac, what did you think of the movie?
Man, I really, really love this movie, honestly. I am not the biggest horror movie connoisseur, and I'm also Furthermore, not that familiar with a lot of the horror movies from this era. But I will say that I think this movie, even to be as old as it is by today's standards, it really, really holds up. And there were a lot of things about it that were executed very well. The acting was great. The shots were great. The music was awesome. The plot and the story was, I'm sure for its time, fresh, and it pushed a lot of envelopes. And yeah, it was really good. I have really no bad complaints or nothing bad to say about it. So yeah.
Well, anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in. If you're still here, just give us a rosemary down in the comments down below.
Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, stay up to date on all of our content because we will be uploading a lot more content. We are not going anywhere. Just stay tuned. And as always, just remember, stay spooky out there.